of issues there, but from 1 year to 24, what are our top 4 causes of death? Number 1, and I am a psychiatrist by training, so I'm always going to continue to say number 1 is suicide, suicide, suicide. And the opioid crisis is staggering, is a problem. It's dwarfed by the amount of suicides that we have every single year. So hopefully we'll have another one of these and we'll be talking about suicide because nobody does. So, so number 1 is suicide. Number 2 for that population overall is actually motor vehicle accidents, but number 3 is opioid overdoses. Okay, so for women, 1 to 15, number 1 is suicide, number 2 is opioid overdoses. Okay. So big issue. This is how it's affecting our community. A couple of things for children and families. What we're seeing a lot, and you're hearing about this, a lot of the teachers are starting to talk about it, a lot of the school social workers are talking about it. So you have a parent who develops a drug problem and could have started off with a great job and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, got that surgery, got some pain pills, and there goes that switch in the brain, and they've gone on to addiction. And then they've gone on to criminal behavior, and they've gone on to lack of stability, all right? So what happens? You don't have enough food in the house. You lose the house. You're on the streets, right? You're getting shuffled around from auntie to granny to uncle to your friend's house, etc. Are they studying? Are they staying clean? You know? And worst case scenario, they're being exposed to a lot of chaos. They're being exposed to a lot of violence. But unfortunately, we see more and more of these stories where they're being sold for the drugs, you know? So the drug man comes by the house, or you go to the drug house, and you're saying, I need some, just hook me up, because you're in withdrawal, and it's a horrible, horrible feeling. And they go, daughter there is about 11, I think she's about, ready to get started. So, and the next thing you know, they're trafficked, okay? So, one of the things that we're hoping to do is do a lot of work in educating schools, the teachers, the social workers, the guards, etc., to be able to identify these issues early. And it's not about taking someone's, kids away from them. It's about helping that family get into treatment, okay? And one thing that a lot of people aren't aware of, I really never thought of until I was asked to go do a speech at a program, is we have homeless shelters for families, okay? And they will help those kids be in school, they'll help them do their homework. There's a place for them to, cook together and whatnot. And so, as I said, it's not about just calling DHS so that you can take the kids away. It's about getting the whole family help, okay? Because how many people here have heard of ACEs? Okay, some folks. ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, okay? Simple list of 10 things. Have you been exposed to divorce? Has there been, someone in the family went to jail? Was there drug use in the home? Were you abused, etc.? So 10 simple yes or no questions. Exposure to these traumatic events in childhood results in lifelong issues for that child. And not just the things that you would think of, like if you've been exposed to this kind of violence, you might have depression, right? Or you might end up with PTSD. And some things that would kind of make sense from learning theory, that if you see families using drugs, you're more likely to use drugs or alcohol yourself, okay? But the interesting thing from the ACEs study is that exposure to these kind of things causes long-term effects. It changes your brain, it changes your nervous system, it changes your immune system, and so that later on, people exposed to these childhood experiences actually have an increased incidence of things like rheumatoid arthritis, diabetes, heart disease, and even cancer, okay? So as early as possible, we want to identify these families that are at risk and get them into help. Another thing to let you know is that every year, 270,000 kids are removed from their parents and put into foster homes. And I know that there are good foster parents out there, but we all also hear all the horror stories that happen in foster care. 1 out of 5 of those placements are of infants. And so they never get to bond with their mothers. They never, have that early experience. And roughly 30% or 33% of those that are taken away from their parents, it's related to substance use. So we want to try to identify those things early and get folks help. Oh, and just for those who don't know, and if you have kids, you know folks with kids, have you heard about bowl parties? Yeah, so back in the day, people used to have what they called garbage can parties, and everyone brings a bottle of some kind of booze and you pour it in there, and then they drink from that. So now they have these things called bowl parties. And they even have instructions online on how to do this. So they tell the kids, go in your parents' medicine cabinet, just take 1 or 2 pills out of all the bottles in there so your parents don't notice that something's gone. And so the price of admission to the party is everyone comes, dumps a handful of pills into the bowl. When everyone's there, they mix it up, and everybody then just downs a handful of pills. Okay? And then how, you or I, if we're going out, you might have your designated driver. They'll have the designated kid who sits there with the naloxone kit and waits for folks to fall out. And it's their job then to give them the naloxone so they don't get in trouble because they have to call the EMS, all right? But as you heard from Dr. Patel, naloxone lasts 15, 20 minutes, And they send the kid home so they don't get in trouble, and the naloxone wears off, and then they're back in an overdose situation, okay? Effects on our first responders and our emergency teams. Couple things to let you know. Liverpool, Ohio, which is in northern Ohio. There's a case out of Menasha, Wisconsin, of police officers who, in the first case, it was a traffic stop that was related to heroin overdose. And he got back to the precinct, brushed some powder off of his uniform without even thinking about it. Turns out it had fentanyl in it. When he brushed it off, some of it crossed his hands and some of it was inhaled. The next thing you know, he drops at the police station. The case in Wisconsin was after a drug bust in a suspected drug house, came back, started having tingling in his hands, lost a sensation in his feet, said he was talking funny, drops. They had to give him numerous doses of naloxone at the precinct while they waited for the ambulance to get there. In both of these cases, the officers lived. We did have a case here in Michigan of a drug-sniffing dog who died from going into the setting. And in this year, I believe it was in January, we had a case in a Wisconsin prison where folks were smuggling in fentanyl in the mailroom. 6 people were exposed, had to be treated with naloxone and hospitalized, okay? The other thing that our first responders are seeing, and so that includes our EMTs, the police, the fire departments, and then our emergency departments, is we're seeing an increase, in folks coming in with an overdose. We're seeing an increase in the car accidents, especially between the opioids and legalization of marijuana. But with the opioids especially, then we're also getting lots of repeat kind of things. So if I fall out here, you call, the EMTs come, they resuscitate me with naloxone, I have the right to refuse to go to a hospital. So 20 minutes later, when the naloxone wears off, I'm down again, you call the EMTs again, they come in, and it may be I leave, and then they get called again because on my way out to the car, I'm out in the parking lot, but this time I don't make it back, okay? Or they do a run to the home, they pick up the lady of the house, they just get her to the, the hospital, and then they're called to go right back to that same address because the man of the house has now gone down. Or because when she went down, she left pills or powder on the floor, and the 8-month-old baby crawled over it and is now dead, okay? So they're seeing these things, and they're starting to get frustrated because unlike many of their other calls, they're not successful, or they're, frequent flyers. They're starting to get frustrated, they're getting PTSD from the things that they're seeing, and they're getting burned out. So we have emergency department physicians, we have EMTs, we have police officers and firemen who, kind of as a way to psychologically deal with it, they start thinking, oh, why do anything? They're gonna die anyway. They stop seeing this as a medical disease and start thinking that these are, just bad people. And the ones that have some ethics are quitting because they just don't want to deal with it anymore. So it's a big impact on our emergency responders. So a few words on the legislation and the effects of that legislation on our delivery of care. So we heard, so there's at the federal level, in 2014, the previous administration is going, oh my God, we got this opioid crisis. We gotta do something. So somebody had asked me, I'd say, well, let's fix poverty, give people jobs, more access to health care, fund, more doctors, et cetera. And they go, I know, we'll make it harder to get OxyContin. Okay. If I made it harder for you to get food, would you stop eating? If I started charging you for air, would you stop breathing? Okay? So making it harder to get OxyContin, does anybody actually think that was going to make people stop using drugs? So what did they do? They started using heroin because it's a lot easier to get. You go down the corner, you don't have to make a doctor's appointment, wait forever, go in there, pay copays, go to the pharmacy, wait forever, pay copays. Just use heroin instead, okay? So, and when you look at the literature of making the OxyContin harder to get, so moving it from a Schedule 3 to a Schedule 2, what ended up happening was, there were some slightly fewer prescriptions for OxyContin. Guess who got less OxyContin? The cancer patients. Those other people that Dr. Patel told you need all kinds of other stuff, they kept getting all kinds of opioids. It was just the cancer patients that got less OxyContin. Should end-stage cancer patients have gotten less OxyContin? No, but that's who got less OxyContin. So that's what the feds did. So then we had a couple of opioid task forces here in Michigan, and so they said the same thing. Opioid crisis, let's do something. So again, we could have paid for more doctors, we could have had clean drinking water for everybody, safer streets, more jobs, fix the damn roads, right? That's what the current governor says. What did they do? They made it harder to get the medicines. Okay, so nobody learned from the DEA's 2014 example. So we have things like PA 246, which means anytime that we start an opioid, we have to give you this form, and it says we covered these 7 different topics, and that form has to go in your record and it has to stay in there forever. It has PA 247, which is that bona fide patient-doctor relationship, which I'm actually okay with that one because that gets me off the hook with my friends and family. So PA 248 to 27, before prescribing, I have to go to MAPS. Okay, that's not that first time. Every time you come in and get a prescription, I have to look at MAPS. And I cannot give you more than 90 days worth without you coming back to see me face to face to get another one. So you have chronic pain, you have cancer pain, it doesn't matter, you have to come back in and see me. Who here ever gets an appointment as fast as they want it when you call your doctor's office?
No.
Okay? I know I don't. And when you get there, who is seen on time? You have a 2 o'clock appointment. How many of you are seen at 2 o'clock when you go see your doctor? Okay? All of these laws are making the doctor take more time with you, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. Okay? But you have to come in more often, and it's going to take more time to have that appointment. So what ends up happening? Decrease access to your doctors, all right? And then the doctors, because PA, which one was it? I think it's 249, basically tells you all the scary things that'll happen to you as a doctor if you didn't do those first things, okay? So then what happens? Even if you have a legitimate reason to have those opioids, I'm really not going to want to give them to you, okay? And so as customers, as consumers, as patients, what we're now hearing a lot of people saying is, I had very legitimate reasons to get these medicines. And clearly my doctors thought so for the last 5 years. However, all of a sudden, abruptly, they're like, and I don't want to give it to you. And as we saw from the literature, folks with cancer pain are getting less access to the meds that were originally approved exactly for that reason. All right? So, and then the other thing we did in Michigan this year is we took something that wasn't controlled at all, gabapentin or Neurontin, and we made it a controlled substance. It's just a level 5, but still. Again, most physicians and most pharmacists will tell you making it harder to get isn't going to decrease people who are addicted and feel like they need it as much as they need food and water from finding a way to take care of that need. The last thing I do want to tell you about is the standing order for naloxone. Have people heard about this? So the way it usually works is if you come to see me, I do a full assessment, I figure out what I think is wrong with you. We agree on a plan of care, and I write you a prescription. And then your insurance covers it because it was medically, hopefully they cover it, because it was medically necessary, and I've documented my full assessment and all that kind of thing, all right? So with naloxone, first and foremost, I will encourage you, anytime any of you are getting a prescription for an opioid, ask your doctor for a prescription for naloxone, okay? In some states it's automatic, and in some states it's automatic that when you fill a prescription for naloxone, the pharmacist will offer you, when you fill a prescription for the opioids, the pharmacist will offer you naloxone. We're not quite there yet, but if I'm gonna get a prescription for opioids, I'm gonna ask my doctor to also give me a prescription for naloxone. You never know, maybe I'll get confused and take too many. Somebody in my house might take my pills and take them, and I'll want that to be available, okay? So that's how that piece works. The standing order is that the chief medical executive, so the top doc for the whole state, has given a standing order that says anybody who feels that either they are at risk themselves for a potential overdose on opioids, or if a family member, a friend, a coworker, I've had people overdose in churches, I've had people overdose in stores, and you saw that in her slide set. So if you think you're in a situation where you might experience someone in an opioid overdose situation, you can walk into a pharmacy, and it's not every pharmacy, but you can go online and see which pharmacies have enrolled in this. And you can just say, you don't have to have a reason, you don't have to have a prescription, you can just walk up and say, I would like some naloxone, okay? They'll give it to you. The only downside is because it wasn't by prescription written specifically for you, you will have to pay out of pocket for it, okay? But that's what the standing order is trying to make it available for people who feel they might be in a situation where it would be helpful, okay? All right, thanks.
Let's give all the presenters a big hand. Have they been fantastic? I certainly want to thank our Chancellor, Dr. Curtis L. Ivory, this was his idea, his concept that we had this.
All right.
The timing could not have been better, because this happens to be the week where not only one but two of the pharmaceutical companies are having to deal with judgments. Big settlements, not enough, I don't think, but it's big in the news. Now, one of the things that has been mentioned by all of our excellent presenters today is that the opioid epidemic is a crisis. One of the things I want to concentrate on is where it really began. It did not start with consumers. It did not. I want to recognize the Honorable Alberta Tinsley Tilapia in the house. It did not start with CVS and Walgreens. It started from the manufacturers. Did it not? Because it used to be provided only to a small fraction of people. But after this letter, this innocuous letter got written saying it's really okay, with no research, no data, they began flooding the market and flooding lobbyist pockets and flooding marketers with information, making everybody think that it was the next best thing to getting rid of pain. So the real challenge is dealing with the greed, the corruption, and the fraud and the deceit, the treachery of people who've been made firms making billions and billions of dollars off the death of our people. People have died for no good reason. People have been introduced to these opioids, drugs, when there are always there have been alternatives. As you heard from our presenters, our body can make, come on somebody.
That's right.
Our bodies can make our own substances to address pain.
Mm-hmm.
Excuse me, can I ask? Everyone's talking all these MDs. Why is there no speaking about chiropractic care and how they help the body heal itself?
You chiropractors do a great job in this country, in this world, by focusing on how the body can heal itself, and our bodies can heal themselves. I'm not just speaking as I happen to be a professor. My name is Joanne Watson. So I've been a legislator with Alberta Tennessee Talabi. I worked for Congress. I worked as the first woman director of the NAACP, and I also am a mother. I'm a mother of 4, grandmother of 4. My eldest daughter, who's a principal, she's an educator in the city. She had a slip and fall on black ice in Detroit. Broke everything on her right side. She's a big girl like her mama. Broke everything. She had to have a reconstruction. And it had to learn to walk again for months and months and months and months and months and months. One of the things she was prescribed was one of these opioids. And my daughter, who happens to be a doctor, she's a PhD, she said, you know, this Oxycontin makes me feel kind of loopy. Mama, they're giving it to me, but it makes me feel a little loopy. That's what she said, Paul. As I'm trying to keep a stiff upper. Inside I was crying because my baby was in pain. But she said I'm going to stop taking this. I'm going to take Tylenol when I have a rough day. I'm not taking this anymore. And the nurses and the doctors, they would ask questions, well, why aren't you taking it? We prescribed it. She said, I'm not taking that. No, you could give that to somebody else. So I believe she was saved by her own discernment.
Praise God.
God.
Praise God.
God told her, I didn't even, she said, this makes me feel loopy. There's something wrong with this. I tell you what's loopy. The fact that these pharmaceutical companies have made billions and billions and billions of dollars tricking and seducing the public, the American public.
That's right.
Into taking drugs, and they need to be off the market. The answer is not to have another commission or another committee or another group of people make it harder to get opioids. Get rid of the manufacturer. In fact, some of them need to go to jail.
Amen.
Somebody needs to go to jail because they knowingly put products on the market that they knew would kill people. And when some people raise flags, red flags, saying there's a challenge to these because they're addictive, they start increasing their marketing. They increase their publication. They increase their advertising because they wanted to sell and sell and sell. What's the answer? The citizens to rise up and take control.
Yes.
Because the FDA, which ought to be monitoring and deciding what gets out there, has not been on the job.
That's
Who
right.
does the FDA work for? They work for us. The people who are in elective offices that allow pharmaceutical companies to do what they want to, they should not be responding to lobbyists who are being paid by the billions. They work for us. Citizens should have the last word. And the opioid crisis is really in our hands. Thank you all very much for coming.
All right. Mother Joanne Watson.
Thank you very much.